Hello, welcome to another episode of the Losers Win Again Fantasy Football Channel. I am your host, Jacob Brown, and we're here to talk about everything you need to know about the running backs for the Week 1 NFL Draftkings slate, and I'm excited to talk about it, so let's get after it. Week 1 will be less than 2 weeks away by the time you're hearing this, and we have a lot to cover. I have all the info you need to build your bankroll this NFL season. After months of research and weeks of preparation for this Week 1 slate, this is what I found most important for you to know, so let's get after it. Knowing the implied team totals is a great first step into figuring out what type of game environments are projected. When thinking about the running back position, you want a home team heavy favorite. For example, the Colts are 8-point favorites, which is the heaviest favorite on the slate against the Texans, making it clear you're going to want to roster Jonathan Taylor. Take a look at the rest of the implied team totals. It's very likely these will update before Week 1 kicks off, so if you want this information at your disposal anytime, subscribe to my social media outlets for the updates until the slate locks. I have a TikTok, a Instagram, of course a YouTube channel, and a Patreon where I charge a very small fee to keep you up to date on all the daily fantasy news, content, projections, ownership, everything you can think of, I have it, and much more. So let's go ahead and take a look at these implied team totals for Week 1. So briefly going over these implied team totals, a few teams I want to highlight here, and this is mainly for cash games. To top it off, of course, you got the Indianapolis Colts here with an 8-point spread. They're the favorites by 8 points against the Houston Texans, who were just awful against running backs last year. Definitely someone you want in your cash game line in Jonathan Taylor. Then we move on to the Cincinnati Bengals. They're a 6.5-point favorite against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joe Mixon looks to be a pretty good play there. Then we move on to the Titans at a 6.5-point favorite. Derrick Henry looks to be a pretty good cash game play. I don't think a lot of people are going to consider him now that Christian McCaffrey is $100 less than he is. And he could end up being a great tournament play. We're definitely going to have to see where the ownership lies in tournaments. But in cash games, Derrick Henry is very viable. Then you go to the Baltimore Ravens, who are 5.5-point favorites. I just read that J.K. Dobbins is still questionable to play for Week 1. But that spread could change, that 5.5-point spread. It could change if J.K. Dobbins is ruled out for worse. But you got to think about it like this. You still got Mike Davis and Tyler Batty, who will both be value plays. And if we can figure out which one is going to get those 14 to 17 carries that Baltimore starting running backs typically get on a week-to-week basis, we're going to have a pretty big edge. So definitely something to keep an eye on as we're going into Week 1. Let's go ahead and move on to the San Francisco 49ers, who are 6.5-point favorites against the Chicago Bears. Their backfield's probably the most complicated backfield in all of football right now. You got Elijah Mitchell, who hasn't done much this offseason or in the preseason. They drafted Tyrion Davis-Price, who looks to be possibly the lead back if Elijah Mitchell isn't healthy. Then you also have Jeff Wilson Jr., and you also have Trey Sermon. I'm just going to assume this is going to be a running back by committee. This is more of a tournament play, in my opinion, because you also got to think about it like this. Trey Lance is probably going to steal some red zone carries from these running backs. So definitely, if you get the right guy, you could win big, but it's going to be real hard to tell. If I had to say right now, if Week 1 was like start today or tomorrow, I'd probably say that Tyrion Davis-Price and Elijah Mitchell are the main key backs, and then you'll get some Trey Sermon and Jeff Wilson sprung in there every once in a while. Then we move on to the New Orleans Saints, who are 5-point favorites against the Atlanta Falcons. This might be my favorite game to attack in a tournament perspective. And honestly, even cash games, I mean, the Saints are pretty heavy favorites against the Falcons, who are always bad against running backs. Alvin Kamara is going to be a great play in this type of game environment. And I'm real curious to see if he will get more involved in the pass game like he has in years past, or if he's going to be that bruiser back that he was last year. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And I know we skipped them earlier, but the Philadelphia Eagles, they're 4.5-point favorites. Miles Sanders is banged up. If he misses week 1, Kenneth Gainwell is going to be someone that strikes a lot of interest for me. He's cheap enough for a cash game play. Also cheap enough to play in tournaments. So definitely stuff to keep an eye on. We typically want to stay away from teams that aren't favored to win. So that's something also to keep an eye on. Like, I'm not interested in James Conner, nor am I interested in, probably not interested in Dalvin Cook, not interested in DeAndre Swift, not interested in Najee Harris, even though he does have pretty good value. That's more something to keep an eye on as we continue. Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans, yeah, he's cheap, but they're 8-point underdogs. I doubt they're going to be running the ball that much. So those are just some things to keep an eye on when we're looking at implied team totals, thinking about the running back position. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. When looking to select a running back, we need to find the defenses that gave up the most Draftkings points to opposing offenses. In this case, since it is week 1, we are using 2021 data and our best judgment from off-season moves and injury news in the future. These stats will be updated for this season once we have a couple weeks under our belt. A game to point out is the Bengals versus Steelers. The Bengals are 6.5-point favorites with an implied team total of 25.5, making Joe Mixon a player we should consider rostering week 1. Here's a list of the worst to best defenses against running backs for DraftKings points averaged in 2021. Now we're looking at the running backs versus defensive ranks. And to top off the list, the New York Jets were the worst defense against running backs at a 33.6 running back fantasy points per game average. Then we move on to the Raiders. They were at a 28.4 DraftKings points per average against opposing running backs. Eagles taking on the Lions. Lions were pretty bad. They were the 4th ranked with 27.9 fantasy points per game against running backs. Texans, 27.4. Chargers, 27.2. Steelers, 26.7. Giants, 26.7. The Eagles were up there at 26.3. Falcons were up there at the top 10. So yeah, there's definitely some interest here, which is why the game environment is so important to look at. So there's definitely some interest here in these running backs. The top 10, you could definitely say the top 10 should be in your player pool off the top. So like J.K. Dobbins, if he's going to play week 1, Austin Eckler, Miles Sanders, if he's going to play week 1, you should have some interest in. Jonathan Taylor, of course, everyone's going to play in their cash games. Josh Jacobs looks to have some interest against the Chargers. They were ranked 6th against running backs last year. Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, DeAndre Swift, Alvin Kamara, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones. Sound like a good group of guys that you would want in your player pool? Of course. And like, I'm not saying all these guys are going to be the best plays, but looking at this stat kind of gives you an idea. I mean, think about it like this. Even if the Jets do improve against running backs this year, they were the worst last year. So even if they just improved to like a top 10, or if they just improved like to 10 spots from what they were last year, that's still pretty good. That means they'll, instead of averaging 33.6 points against defenses, they might average like 10 points less and be in that Atlanta Falcons, Cincinnati Bengals range, which is still pretty good. So take this into consideration. I mean, I don't put an extremely huge amount of weight into these stats here because it is a brand new season. Off-season changes have happened. Injuries have happened. Trades have happened. Everything. So take this with a grain of salt, but I would extremely consider this preparing for the week 1 slate. Understanding projections is pretty simple. We have our base projection, ceiling, previous 4-game average, and our floor projections. We typically look for running backs that have high ceilings for GPP plays, which is considered a boom or bust running back, while a high floor running back is a safe play meant for cash games. For example, Jonathan Taylor is a perfect example of a cash game play due to the high floor he is considered safe, while James Conner would be more of a GPP play with the high ceiling and low floor. Here's the rest of our current RB projections. This is very likely to change before week 1 kicks off, so subscribe to my social media outlets for updates until the slate locks. We have a TikTok, Patreon. For a very small price, you can get all this information on my Patreon. Updates will be on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, of course, where you're watching me right now. And yeah, go take a look at it. Let me know what you think. Looking at these projections for week 1 for running backs, at the top, of course, you got Jonathan Taylor at 23.9 with a high ceiling of 35.6, average of 18.4, and a floor of 19.9. Christian McCaffrey up there as the second highest projected running back on the slate at $8,500 with a 22.6 projection. He has a ceiling of 23.5, which I think that's kind of low, which will probably change in weeks to come because I think he's going to smash in week 1. 17.3 average and a 14.3 floor. A couple other names to point out here would be Najee Harris at $6,400, and he is the 5th highest projected running back on the slate at 17.8. It is to be known that he is dealing with a minor foot injury, the Liz Frank injury. A lot of people remember Cam Newton getting a Liz Frank a couple years ago. It's not as serious as a Cam Newton's, but it's something definitely to keep an eye on and monitor as we're getting prepared for our week 1 slate and trying to create a player pool. So I will definitely try to keep y'all up to date on Najee Harris's injury status. Then we look at guys like Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook. These are guys that are, I think, going a little overlooked. I think people would rather just either spend up for Austin Eckler or Derrick Henry, or they would rather just pay down for Joe Mixon or Aaron Jones or DeAndre Swift. I think these guys are just really getting overlooked. If they go like 10% owned, 5% owned, it's going to be hard not to select them in your lineup to get different. I mean, I'm not saying that you need to be over the field on them, but you could very well need to be over the field. Alvin Kamara is playing the Atlanta Falcons, one of the worst defenses in all of football. I understand why people don't want to play Dalvin Cook, but Alvin Kamara, I'm a little confused about that. Nick Chubb is down there. I'm kind of interested in him just because nobody's on him, even in a season-long draft. So you got to think about this too. Like, a lot of players that are going to be playing, they're going to be drafting based off of what they've heard preparing for their season-long drafts. Guys like Nick Chubb are going to get overlooked just because of recency bias with the fact that Jacoby Brissett's now the quarterback. I know they're going to run the ball a lot more, and that should be good for Nick Chubb. James Conner, like we talked about in the previous slide, great ceiling, low floor, not a good projection, but I probably won't be playing in week 1, but I'm not saying not to because he could be a very sneaky play and a way to get different. A lot of people are going to be playing the receivers on the Arizona Cardinals side, and they're not even going to consider James Conner, which should be a great way to get different. I'm not really interested in David Montgomery. Have a little slight interest in Antonio Gibson now that we heard the news about Brian Robinson. That was just real sad news, and I hope he has a speedy recovery and can get back on the field in no time. But yeah, Antonio Gibson's going to have a lot of opportunities. J.D. McKissic's also banged up, so we could see him getting involved a little bit in the passing game as well. Definitely going to have to look at that depth chart for the Washington Commanders. And not a lot else really sticks out to me. I kind of like A.J. Dillon at his price point and at his projection. Chase Edmonds is someone else that sticks out. I know they're playing the Patriots, and the Patriots have a pretty good run defense. But Chase Edmonds is going to be something to reckon with. I highly doubt he'll be at this price point ever again after the next couple weeks. But yeah, that's pretty much it that I have interest on this list. This is more of just you guys getting a look at what I'm offering, projection-wise, ceiling-wise. Let me know what you think in the comments section, if I should be adding anything to this sheet, or tell me what you guys think. But yeah, I'm definitely going to have this updated every week, at the beginning of the week, middle of the week, late in the week. So just consider this. It will be on my Patreon. When looking at projections versus salary, that creates player value. That value will either help increase the player's interest or decrease it depending on price point and matchup. For example, Najee Harris is at a great value due to his price point, projection, and game environment, while Josh Jacobs is a bad value due to price point, projection, and game environment. Here's the rest of our top value plays. This is very likely to update before week 1 kicks off, so you should be considering subscribing to my social media outlets. I have a TikTok, an Instagram, and of course a YouTube channel, along with a Patreon with a very small fee where I update projections, ownership, pretty much anything you can think of, I will have on my Patreon page. So consider to take a look at it, and let's go ahead and move on to the best values for running back for week 1. As we said at the top, of course, we just talked about Najee Harris at 6,400 with a 17.7 projection at a 2.77 value, which is the best value on this slate. And you got Christian McCaffrey, 22.6 at $8,500, giving it a 2.66 value. Jonathan Taylor, of course, everyone's going to want to play him. He's at a pretty decent value, being the most expensive back on the slate, still at a top 3 value. Austin Eckler, I like Austin Eckler. I think I'm going to have to pair him with Justin Herbert in some of my Justin Herbert stacks. But he's also a good one-off play, or if you're in a tournament and you want to make a mini stack with Austin Eckler, one of the Raiders players, that'd be a good idea as well. Definitely curious to see what his ownership is at $8,200. He's at a 2.61 value. Pretty good. And here's somebody that's just really going overlooked in my opinion, but I think he's going to get some steam going into the week 1 slate. Looking at Saquon Barkley at $6,100, he's projected to score 15.9 fantasy points and a 2.61 value. I understand why people are skeptical about playing Saquon Barkley. I was one of them last year. I may have only rostered him maybe once or twice in that 18-week season, so I definitely get that. But the value doesn't lie here. 15.9 projection at a 2.61 value at $6,100. That's pretty impressive. Derrick Henry, also the same game, which could also cause some issues here. You definitely don't want to play 2 running backs from the same game in most cases. But Derrick Henry at 8,600 with a 21.8 projection at 2.53 value. The value kind of dips off here after Saquon Barkley. You got Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb pretty close together. Joe Mixon at $7,100 at a 2.49 value, which kind of tells you what you need to look at when going into your cash games. Najee Harris, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, those are guys that you want to consider. Pretty much after Joe Mixon, I don't think I really want to play anyone in cash unless something like J.K. Dobbins doesn't play week 1, and you got Mike Davis and Tyler Batty as great value plays, or if one of these other guys is rolled out, like we discussed earlier with Miles Sanders being questionable. So yeah, A lot of great value here at the top. But once we get to probably Aaron Jones, that's kind of where I'm going to draw the line. For cash game plays, DeAndre Swift will be a great tournament play. Kind of excited about Antonio Gibson again, due to the unfortunate news of Brian Robinson Jr. Alvin Kamara, his value is kind of low, but I love that for tournament plays because I think his projection is low due to that price point. Elijah Mitchell, not interested in him, not interested in Breece Hall. That's something to keep an eye on that I've been wanting to discuss. Breece Hall has been working with the second team. Michael Carter-Williams has been working with the first team. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on as we're leading into week 1. And I know I just said Michael Carter-Williams. I always get him mixed up with the basketball player. Let me correct that. Michael Carter. That's his name, Michael Carter. I always screw that up. But yeah, Michael Carter from the Jets is working with the first string on the Jets. So that's something to keep an eye on. He's a lot cheaper. And Breece Hall, I think, is getting overhyped. We've seen this trend the last few years with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris. These guys get overhyped and they get boosted up in the draft rankings, and everyone's excited to play them week 1, week 2, week 3, and they disappoint time and time again. And then they end up losing a lot of money just because they think that rookie's going to be that guy. And I think Breece Hall still could be a very good pro back, but it might be later in the season. But yeah, those are the main interests that I have. Definitely keep an eye on guys like Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook's ownership because they have a good ceiling. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on. Now to one of my new favorite segments that I've been making, Who Likes a Discount? Every week there's players that are completely overpriced, or there are players that are really underpriced. For week 1, Draftkings typically prices players a lot lower to get interest from casual players, to get the opportunity to get any player that they want in their lineup. However, Draftkings is messed up big time. Who likes to go shopping for a good bargain? Or who likes to buy low in the stock market? The same thing applies here. There are 4 running backs that are tremendously underpriced based off last year's performances. For example, Nick Chubb was priced $1,400 cheaper than he was in the last regular season game he played in last season. That's a huge misprice that you should consider to exploit in week 1 because the price may never be that low for the rest of the season. Here are the rest of the overpriced and underpriced DraftKings running backs. This will be updated weekly on my Patreon. So, in this discount page, obviously there's some names on here that don't really matter anymore. They were just in different roles last year. So, at the top, of course, Nick Chubb, as we discussed, he was at $6,500 for this week, and he's at $7,900 for the previous week he played in week 18, and that's a $1,400 difference, the hugest difference that I found amongst running backs. But as we scroll down here, we get to Najee Harris, who is at $6,400, who ended the season last year at $7,200. That's an $800 discount. David Montgomery, $6,000, was $68,000 in week 18. Now that's an $800 difference. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is at an $800 difference. I would definitely keep an eye on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I know there's some rumblings that Ronald Jones could get traded or waived before the season starts. Clyde Edwards-Helaire hasn't performed very well in the last couple of seasons, so definitely something to keep an eye on. But $5,400 compared to $6,200 is a pretty big difference at $800 price point. Boston Scott definitely had a different role last year, but he's sitting at an $800 difference. One guy I really want to point out, though, Alvin Kamara at $7,600. He was $8,300 in week 18. He's at a $700 difference. That's a huge discount. We got to buy low on Alvin Kamara. I think he's going to be the guy that I put my foot on, my stamp on, as the player that's just going tremendously overlooked so far in week 1. We still haven't got to see any ownership yet, but once the ownership starts coming in, I guarantee you Alvin Kamara is going to be one of those players that are just completely going overlooked. Move on to A.J. Dillon at $5,300. He was $6,200 when the season ended. everyone's talking up this combination of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon as if like they're going to be getting a lot of receptions as well. A.J. Dillon got 30 plus catches last year. At 5,300, I just think that's way too cheap, and I want to exploit that as much as possible. Definitely got to wait on ownership, however. Some other names that stick out: Elijah Mitchell, 5,400. He was at 6K in Week 18. Cordell Patterson was at 6,400. He's now 5,800 for this week. Chase Edmonds is another name that sticks out, but he's on a brand new team. I think he's going to get used a lot more, and he'll be way above this 5,800 price point that he was at last year, probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So definitely something to keep an eye on. I think it's time to buy low on Chase Edmonds. Mike Davis, he was at 5K flat last season. He was on the Falcons. Cordell Patterson took that role from him. Look, I'm not saying that Mike Davis is a great running back, but if J.K. Dobbins is out, he's sitting at $4,400. He'll be the best value running back on the slate, or one of the best values on the running back slate, or on this running back slate, if we can get him starting if J.K. Dobbins is out. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got to talk about. I mean, if you go to my Patreon, I have a full list of players' price differences. This is just the very top of the list. These were the names that I thought were the most shocking as of right now. But if you keep scrolling down, we definitely have a lot more to look at. So you're definitely going to want to check out my Patreon. As we look at our running back interest, just know that these could very well change before the season starts. Like, obviously, I haven't got the update Brian Robinson being out yet here in the X section, but here's the running back interest that I have as of right now. Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, Najee Harris, and Saquon Barkley are all yeses for me. Then we move on to our X's, which means that we want to play these guys in GPPs. We got Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, David Montgomery, Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins if he's rolled in, Chase Edmonds, and A.J. Dillon. I might have to throw Antonio Gibson in there now that Brian Robinson is rolled out due to the unfortunate tragedy that he was in. We hope he gets a speedy recovery. And then I have a long list of no's. James Conner, Josh Jacobs, Alexander Madison, Mark Ingram. Definitely considering moving Antonio Gibson back into the X range. Cordell Patterson, Damian Harris, Kareem Hunt, James Robinson, Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson, Chuba Hubbard, Elijah Mitchell. Just due to that, like, the 49ers backfield is just terrible to figure out right now. It's going to be one of the hardest backfields to figure out all year long. Miles Sanders and then another tough backfield. He's also dealing with an injury. We definitely need to keep an eye on Miles Sanders because if he is out, Kenneth Gainwell could very well be a great value play. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I have no. Jamal Williams, Ronald Jones, Khalil Herbert, Michael Carter. I'm definitely thinking about considering Michael Carter as an X player. Just due to the fact that he is working with the ones right now. J.D. McKissick's dealing with an injury. He should be ready for week 1, but still don't have a lot of interest at that price point. Naheem Hines is getting talked up a lot in season-long content. Definitely will have a little interest in him. Jeff Wilson Jr., no interest. San Francisco backfield is just crazy. Gus Edwards, no interest. He will be out for week 1. He was put on the PUP list, so he'll be out for the first 4 weeks of the season. Samaje Perine, no interest. No interest in Hassan Haskin or Tyrion Davis-Price. There's definitely a longer list than that, but those are just the key guys that I have no interest in. But yeah, those are my interests for week 1 so far. Definitely keep watching because we will have a first look video for week 1 coming out next Monday coming up. The week of the regular season starting, so you definitely want to keep watching for that, and this will update weekly, daily, whenever I need to update it. It will be updated on my Patreon. So if you subscribe to my Patreon, you will get a lot of content there that you will not get on YouTube or any other social media device. So yeah, definitely let me know what you think in the comments. If you think I'm leaving someone out from this yes column or leaving someone out from the X column, let me know in the comments section. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content, hit that like, subscribe, and that notification bell to get more content just like this. My Patreon provides these sheets we've discussed today and much more for a $5 a month fee. Drop down in the comments to ask me about it. Subscribe to my social media outlets for updates until the Slate locks. I have a TikTok, Instagram, and a YouTube channel. And I just really appreciate you guys taking your time out of your day to watch this. Hopefully I can help you get ready for that week 1 slate. We're here to ball out, guys, so let's do it. Coming up next will be the wide receiver video. That should be dropping Wednesday afternoon. Thanks for watching.